Throughout the 100-year history of the NFL, it seems like there's always a team of the decade. A team that's so good throughout the decade that they become synonymous with it. When you think of the NFL in the 1960s, the first team that probably pops up in your mind is the Green Bay Packers. Think of the 1980s, and you're probably thinking of the San Francisco 49ers and the 4 Super Bowls that they won. But perhaps no team exemplifies this more than the Pittsburgh Steelers of the 1970s. In a 6-year stretch, they won 4 Super Bowls. They went from a laughingstock at the start of the decade to one of the greatest dynasties in NFL history by the end of it. And during this run of theirs, they had an incredible winning streak going. On November 12, 1978, Pittsburgh lost a 10-7 battle against the Los Angeles Rams. After that game, they won 5 straight to close out the season. Then they won all 3 of their postseason matchups, including Super Bowl 13 against the Dallas Cowboys. And then, to start off the 1979 season and defend their title, they had won 4 straight games. After defeating the Baltimore Colts by a final score of 17-13, when you add it all up, they had just won 12 straight games. A winning streak like this was absolutely historic. If they could win their 13th straight game, they would be one of just 7 teams in NFL history at the time to win 13 straight. And they'd be just the 3rd team to pull it off since the 1950s. Unfortunately for Pittsburgh, their quest for their 13th consecutive win was an unsuccessful one. They ran into unlucky number 13. And the reason the streak ended? You guessed it, a botched call by the officials. This is the story of the call that ended Pittsburgh's historic winning streak. Now, before I talk about the call itself, I want to give a little bit of background as to how this game was going beforehand. Also, I want to emphasize the fact that I am not saying that Pittsburgh would have won this game if the call was correctly made. There was still a bit that had to happen, and blaming the officials for being the sole reason you lost a game usually doesn't hold much weight, unless we're talking about a Western Conference Finals situation where the game was clearly rigged. So with that being said, let's talk about the game. September 30th, 1979 at Veterans Stadium in this interstate matchup between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Philadelphia Eagles. This was a battle between 2 of the top teams in the league at the time. Pittsburgh entered this game on their 12-game winning streak, and they were 4-0 to start off the season. It was just the 3rd time in franchise history that they had started 4-0, but it's worth noting that they started 4-0 in 1978, and when that happened, they wound up winning the Super Bowl. Not a bad spot to be in after 4 games. As for Philadelphia, they were 3-1. On one hand, that's a really good spot to be in after 4 games, especially since they had only allowed 58 points, which was tied with Tampa Bay for the best defense in the NFC. On the other hand, Dallas and Washington were also 3-1 after 4 games, so they didn't have a whole lot of room for error going forward. 2 good teams squaring off against each other, and it's a bit of a rekindling of an old rivalry. The Steelers and Eagles used to play each other every single year before the merger, but after Pittsburgh moved over to the AFC, times had changed. The last time these teams met was back in 1974, before Pittsburgh had even won a Super Bowl. Pittsburgh won that game 27-0. And the last time these teams met in Philadelphia was in 1970, roughly 1 decade prior to this one. Safe to say, this was a highly anticipated matchup, because it's been a while. Pittsburgh jumped out to an early 7-0 lead on a 7-yard rush by Sidney Thornton. But then, the tide turned in favor of the Eagles. They would score 17 unanswered points over the next 3 quarters. Pittsburgh turned the ball over on 4 straight possessions, including a 3rd-and-1 play at Philadelphia's 2-yard line where Franco Harris fumbled. Terry Bradshaw couldn't get anything going until late, as he completed less than 50% of his passes. He threw 2 interceptions, and he had a passer rating of just 49.5. After the game, Bradshaw would say that it was one of my annual disaster games that I have 2 or 3 times a year. I'm good at it. Again, I want to reiterate that when you turn the ball over 4 times and allow 17 unanswered points, it's not solely the officials' fault that you lost this game. But as you'll find out soon, they didn't help. Pittsburgh trailed 17-7 with 2:48 left in the game. At this point, Hall of Fame quarterback Terry Bradshaw had less than 100 yards passing. But this one's not over yet, because Bradshaw would embark on a touchdown drive to get Pittsburgh back into it. He found John Stallworth over the middle for a first down. He found Rocky Bleier on a screen pass for another first down. Then he found John Stallworth again on a diving catch for the first down. You be the judge of whether or not this is a catch. And on the very next play, Bradshaw found Stallworth in the end zone for the touchdown. There's a reason why Stallworth is a Hall of Famer, and it's plays like this. Matt Barr tacked on the extra point, and now it's a 17-14 game. Which leads us to the onside kick. All the pressure right now is riding on rookie kicker Matt Barr. Oddly enough, he's popped up in a few videos of mine now by pure coincidence. He plays a role in Pete Stoyanovic's story, and how his miss during a 1989 game between the Browns and the Dolphins ended up saving Stoyanovic's career. That link is in the upper right corner. And he plays a role in the Raul Allegre story, as his heroics during the 1990 postseason, including his game-winning kick in the NFC Championship, made the Giants move on from Allegre. That link is also in the upper right corner. Right now, though, Barr is a 23-year-old rookie out of Penn State drafted by the Steelers in the 6th round of the 1979 NFL Draft. He's had an extremely rough start to his career so far, as he's missed a field goal in each of his first 4 games, and he's missed an extra point. He's made just 50% of his field goal attempts through the first 4 weeks, which is really, really bad. For some perspective, a field goal percentage of 50% the year before would have placed him in the bottom quarter of the league's kickers. Now, things would get better for Barr. He would wind up kicking until 1995, would be a part of 2 Super Bowl winning teams, and would star in this KFC commercial that I feel like I have to play.
I do one thing. I kick this ball through those 2 poles. Do one thing all the time. You get to be great. Like Kentucky Fried Chicken. They don't try to do everything. Just chicken, and no one else does it tender and juicy the Colonel's way.
Kentucky Fried Chicken, we do it right for you.
I do kicking right. They do chicken right.
Kentucky Fried Chicken, we do chicken right.
2 quick things. Number 1, why is a kicker doing a spot for KFC? He wasn't a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro or even very good as a member of the Steelers. But perhaps my biggest question, why are the laces in? The technique is all wrong. I've done enough commercial breakdown videos though, so if you want to check one of those out, I'll leave a link in the upper right corner. Anyways, back to the game. Barr has had a rough start to his career, but he's got a chance to be the hero here. The game is resting on his shoulders. Successfully convert this onside kick, and Pittsburgh's hopes are still alive. Fail, and this one is over, as Philadelphia can just run out the clock. For about 5 seconds, he was the hero. And then, the refs came into play.
Take a look at Philadelphia's defense. They know that, they have 10 men up 10 yards away.
It has to go 10 yards, and Barr may have fallen on it. He was chasing it. The Steelers have it. Barr just dribbling the ball, and Matt Barr comes up with it.
Philadelphia's waiting around looking at it to go 10 yards. They can go get it any time that they want. Pittsburgh couldn't touch it before it went 10 yards.
And now they say no. They say it does not go 10 yards, and the Eagles have the ball.
The ball must go 10 yards before Pittsburgh can touch it.
And Chuck Noll has come out of the field from the far side.
Ball was touched before it went to 10 yards by the kicking team. Will re-kick 5 yards back.
The rules in 1979 are the same as they are today regarding how far the ball must travel. You have to wait 10 yards before you can touch it. After 10 yards, it's a free-for-all, but if you're a member of the kicking team and you touch it before it goes 10 yards, it is illegal. Oddly enough, NBC never showed a replay of this play. Not from the original broadcast angle, and not from a reverse angle. What you just saw is literally the only footage that was shown at the time of this play. And I've slowed it down and I've looked at it a bunch of times, and while I can't 100% say without the reverse angle, I'm pretty confident in saying that Matt Barr never touched this ball. I can't see the ball changing directions or taking a weird deflection somewhere along the line. This was a legit kick. Barr kicked it perfectly, he boxed out the tight end, and he fell on that football. But the referees thought this wasn't legit. They thought that Barr had touched the ball before it went 10 yards. And remember, this was before the advent of instant replay. I made a video about that if you want to check it out. Anyways, as Pittsburgh's offense was heading onto the field, the referees changed their mind and ruled that the ball was touched. In 1979, the rules were a bit different, as Pittsburgh was assessed a 5-yard penalty and they were allowed to re-kick. This time though, Philadelphia recovered. They were ready for Barr's kick, the Eagles got the ball, ran out the clock, and snapped Pittsburgh's winning streak. After the game, Steelers head coach Chuck Noll was understandably furious. He even ran onto the field to give the referees a piece of his mind. He stated that they are not supposed to call those. They're supposed to get them right. It was a lousy call. They blew it. The kick surprised the Eagles, and it surprised the officials. There were too many surprises. And just like that, Pittsburgh's 12-game winning streak was over. Their quest for number 13 was stopped at the hands of their interstate rival. Again, I want to reiterate that there is no guarantee that Pittsburgh would have won this game if the referees made the correct call and awarded Pittsburgh possession. The Steelers were struggling on offense all day and they were still down by 3 points. They still needed to drive down the field in a minute and either get the field goal to tie it, which was no guarantee seeing how poor the offense was for most of the day and how inaccurate Matt Barr was kicking field goals early in his career, or get the touchdown to take the lead. And even if they tied it, who knows how overtime would have played out. So there's a lot going on here, and when you turn the ball over 4 times, lose the turnover battle by 2, and put up roughly 100 passing yards until the final 3 minutes of the game, one specific call isn't the reason that you lost. But it definitely didn't help. The funny part about all of this for Pittsburgh is that, while the streak was nice, none of this ended up mattering in the end. Pittsburgh finished the season at 12-4 and won their division. Pittsburgh was the number 2 seed, as they lost the head-to-head tiebreaker to San Diego. But Pittsburgh still wound up hosting all of their playoff games, so it's not like this call cost them home field advantage. And they wound up winning the Super Bowl, which is the ultimate prize in the end. Plus, if you believe that everything evens out eventually, and that the number of calls that you benefit from and get hurt from are perfectly balanced in a given season, the Steelers definitely got some of that help later down the line. As for Philadelphia, they would finish the season with an 11-5 record. They made it to the postseason where they would lose in the divisional round to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So as awful as this call was, in the end, it literally did not matter. Philadelphia didn't take anyone's spot in the playoffs because of this, and Pittsburgh still wound up hosting all of their playoff games and winning their 4th Vince Lombardi trophy. Funny how that all worked out in the end. This game only ended up mattering to the bettors and to the symbolic nature of the winning streak. Chuck Noll knew that the streak was going to end someday. It was inevitable. He said that this winning streak of theirs was like death, and it was sure to happen sooner or later. But I'm not sure he ever foresaw the streak ending like this, at the hands of a blown call by the officials.